Hello and welcome back to Voice Behind the Case, a space where we slow down, look deeper, and tell the full stories behind tragedies that deserve more than a headline. Today's case takes us to the province of Mpumalanga, where a deeply disturbing family tragedy unfolded. It is a story that shocked an entire community and raised painful questions about belief, fear, and violence. At the center of this case is a woman who should have been safe in her own home. Instead, her life ended in one of the most heartbreaking ways imaginable. The person responsible was someone she had raised and cared for all her life. This is the tragic story connected to the death of Thembi Ngwenya and the actions of his son Bongani Thulani Matsane. What began as an ordinary day quickly turned into a nightmare that no family or community could forget. As we walk through the events of this case, we will look at what happened, how the crime unfolded, and how justice eventually caught up with the man responsible. This is the story behind the case. The small community of Mganduzweni is a quiet rural area where neighbors often know each other well and daily life moves at a slower pace. Many families in the area rely on agriculture and small jobs to support themselves. For the most part, the community is peaceful and serious violent crimes are rare. That is why the events that took place in December 2022 shocked residents so deeply. People in the area knew the victim as a quiet, older woman who lived with her adult son. She was known as someone who kept to herself and focused on her home and family. Like many parents, she had spent years raising her children and trying to build a stable life for them. No one imagined that the danger she would eventually face would come from inside her own home. The tragedy would soon leave the entire community in disbelief. Many neighbors would later say they never expected such violence from someone they had seen around the area. Unfortunately, what unfolded next would change everything. At the center of the story was Thembi Ngwenya, a 64-year-old woman who had lived in the community for many years. She shared her home with her son Bongani Thulani Matsane, who was 33 years old at the time of the crime. Living together as adults is common in many households across South Africa, especially in rural areas. Families often stay together to support one another financially and emotionally. However, people close to the situation later revealed that there had been tension between the two. Matsane had reportedly become convinced that his mother was responsible for the problems in his life. He believed that she was somehow using witchcraft against him. These beliefs, while deeply troubling, are not unheard of in certain communities where traditional explanations for hardship still exist. Over time, his suspicions began to grow stronger and more dangerous. Instead of seeking help or questioning those beliefs, he allowed them to fuel anger and resentment. That growing resentment would eventually lead to a tragic and irreversible decision. On the evening of the 14th of December 2022, the situation inside the home appeared calm on the surface. According to information later presented in court, Ngwenya asked her son to go to a nearby shop to buy bread. It was a normal request and one that likely seemed completely routine. Matsane agreed and left the house to make the purchase. When he returned, he handed the bread to his mother as she had asked. At that moment, there was nothing unusual about the interaction. After giving her the bread, he briefly stepped outside again. What his mother did not know was that he had already made a horrifying decision. Somewhere in those moments, the anger and suspicion he had been carrying turned into violence. He returned to the house armed with a hand hoe, a farming tool commonly used in gardens and small fields. What happened next would change the lives of everyone connected to the family forever. Without warning, Matsane approached his mother from behind inside the house. He then struck her on the head with the hand hoe. The sudden attack left her injured and terrified. In desperation, Ngwenya ran out of the house screaming for help. She hoped someone nearby might hear her cries and come to her rescue. But the attack did not stop there. Matsane chased after her and continued striking her during the assault. The violence was brutal and relentless. Eventually, the elderly woman collapsed from her injuries. Her cries for help faded as the attack came to an end. By the time the assault was over, her life had been tragically taken. What followed would show that the violence was not the only shocking part of the crime. After the attack, Matsane dragged his mother's body back into the house. He placed her on the bed as if trying to stage the scene differently. But the situation took an even darker turn. In an apparent attempt to hide what he had done, he set the bed on fire. The flames began to burn the bedding and parts of the room. Fires like this can quickly spread and destroy evidence. It appeared he was trying to make the situation look like something else had happened. Investigators would later say that he also attempted to clean the house. He reportedly wiped blood from the floor in an effort to remove signs of the attack. However, covering up a violent crime is far more difficult than many people realize. The truth has a way of revealing itself through evidence and investigation. Soon, authorities would begin to piece together exactly what had happened inside the home. Police were alerted to the situation shortly after the events unfolded. Officers arrived at the scene and began investigating the suspicious circumstances surrounding the death. It quickly became clear that the fire and the injuries did not match a simple accident. Evidence pointed toward a violent attack that had occurred before the fire started. Matsane was arrested the same day. His behavior and the evidence found at the house raised serious questions. Investigators worked to collect forensic evidence and witness statements. The case was then handed over to prosecutors for further legal action. Authorities charged Matsane with murder and defeating the ends of justice, which refers to attempts to hide or interfere with evidence in a crime. The charges reflected both the violence of the act and the effort to cover it up. The legal process would soon begin to determine his fate. The case eventually moved through the justice system and was heard in the Mpumalanga High Court. During court proceedings, prosecutors outlined the events leading up to the attack. They described how Matsane had accused his mother of witchcraft and blamed her for his misfortunes. The court also heard details about the violent nature of the attack and the attempt to destroy evidence. Judges in such cases must consider many factors when deciding on a sentence. These include the seriousness of the crime, the circumstances surrounding it, and the impact on the victim's family. In this case, the victim was a vulnerable elderly woman attacked by her own child. The betrayal of that relationship made the crime even more disturbing. The court also acknowledged the broader issue of violence linked to witchcraft accusations. Such beliefs have sometimes led to tragic attacks on innocent people. Ultimately, the court had to deliver a sentence that reflected the severity of the crime. In September 2024, the court reached its final decision. Bongani Thulani Matsane was sentenced to life imprisonment for murder. In addition, he received 5 years for defeating the ends of justice. However, the sentences were ordered to run concurrently, meaning they would be served at the same time. The life sentence ensured that he would remain behind bars for a very long time. For the justice system, the verdict represented accountability for the loss of Ngwenya's life. But for the community and the family, the outcome could never truly repair the damage that had been done. A mother had lost her life, and a family had been permanently torn apart. Cases like this leave lasting emotional scars on everyone involved. They also raise difficult conversations about belief, responsibility, and violence. Sadly, this tragedy is another reminder of how quickly suspicion and anger can turn deadly. Thank you for watching Voice Behind the Case. Stories like this remind us how important it is to look beyond headlines and understand the deeper human realities behind tragic events. If the story moved you, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing this video so that more people can hear these stories. Every case we cover is about real people and real lives that deserve to be remembered. If you have thoughts about this case or want to discuss it respectfully, feel free to share them in the comments below. Your engagement helps keep these conversations going. It also helps bring attention to stories that might otherwise be forgotten. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and remember that behind every case we discuss, there are real families living with the consequences long after the headlines fade.